So I said I was retiring from this, and a month ago I had dinner with a couple of friends. And it was like a tsunami after that. So I'm crying because I love that you're here. I am crying because it makes me very, very sad that as a teacher, my profession is going to be the one to indoctrinate your kids. And my profession is going to teach your kids that they have rights that go beyond what you say in the home. And our government is going to use our kids to change our culture, like they have in all of the horrible things you've witnessed throughout history. So I'm going to read some, and I'm probably just going to talk some, and hopefully it's all going to make sense, because when you look at what's happening in education, it seems like a fog, and nobody can really cut through this fog, because what's happening in one school, in Manitoba anyway, is not happening in the other school. And what's happening in one classroom is not the same thing as what's happening in the next classroom, even if it's just down the hallway. And you might be hearing the stories because you're hearing that there are kids who are being taught highly graphic. I want to be careful of the kids who are here, but they're being taught all the things, well beyond what they should possibly be taught in a school. But some of us are sitting here saying, well, my kid's safe. I know my teacher. They're a really good teacher. Well, guys, we're getting to the point where teachers are not going to be allowed to do the things that they've done for generations, which is close their door and just teach. Because the agenda is so much bigger than the individual teacher. It's so much bigger than the principal of the school. It's so much bigger than your trustees. Guys, it's bigger than our premier. And we are finding over and over again that the people who should have the moral courage to stand for our kids can't find it. So we need to pray for these people, and we need to pray for protection. You know, I didn't want to be here, and Rick asked me to be here, and other people asked me to be here, and so I had to think about it. And then I thought, well, I could dress in a disguise. I could make my hair all crazy, and I don't know how to do my makeup weird, but like I looked it up, there are some weird things you can do with your face. And then I thought, well, guess what? I believe that I serve the one and true God, and that his law is higher than man's law. And I said, you gotta put on the full armor to do any of this stuff. And it is crazy that today I have to be here because I have different plans for my kids. I was going to be a teacher forever because I was awesome at it. And my kids were going to go through the public education system because I knew that as long as I had really good conversations at home, my kids would be fine. But guys, that's not the case anymore. You know, as good a parents as we want to be, and I am victim of this as well, data tells us that we spend about 5 minutes a day talking to our kids outside of asking them to brush their teeth and making their bed and making sure they pack their lunch and going to the next sporting events. 5 minutes a day about the stuff that really matters. But as a teacher, do you know how many hours a day I had your children in my hands? Hours. And as a teacher, I believed it fundamentally was my job to teach your child to read. We want literacy, to write. We want intellectual thought, to think critically and examine and come to their own conclusions. And it wasn't my job to impose my values and my beliefs upon a child. It was my job to respect that that was the home's job. And it was not my job to impose my own morality on the children. It was my job to respect the laws that already protect our kids. But that's shifting, and it's shifting under our feet so fast, we don't even know it's happening. Because we're saying, but it's not happening in my classroom. Well, guess what, guys? Manitoba government, I was on the phone the other day, the guy's not gonna like this, but I said, hey, I'm from southern Manitoba. I've been out of the game for a while, had a couple of kids, I'm getting back into teaching. Like, what's happened to the sex ed program? Because something's changed. Like, I used to teach healthy relationships. I used to teach no means no, and that meant to the boys and to the girls. I used to teach what happens when you get into a situation where you're really in trouble and you are being manipulated, what do? I said to this guy, but something's changed. Like, I'm seeing that I'm supposed to be doing this, and I'm supposed to be doing that, and there's just, the door has become fully opened. So he told me that there's a pilot program coming out this spring, and hopefully, by next year, September, there's a new curriculum for sex ed. Except it won't look like sex ed, guys. If the outside interest groups that are very, very, very interested in your children are successful, there is going to be a shift from these classes happening in a pocket of time or in a special class to being integrated into every single subject, from the first day of school to the last day of school, from kindergarten to grade 12, and our universities are full of it already. There will be no opt-out option. Like in Manitoba right now, you actually have that. Technically, it's not called opt-out. They called it an alternative delivery option. You all have the right, as parents, to educate your kids morally, and because, look at Manitoba. Like, how much of Manitoba actually respects stripping parents of their rights? Like, basically none. They did a survey out in Saskatchewan. Guess what? 86 or 89% of the population surveyed, yeah, the parents are kind of in charge of their kids. Well, duh. And I don't think Manitoba would look that different from Saskatchewan. So I'm going to lose my thoughts now because I'm not reading off my paper. But, I am losing my thoughts. Okay, so anyways, there's these outside organizations and they want access to your kids. And they have unlimited funding. They have funding from federal government, they have funding from provincial government, they have funding from Health Canada. And they are saying, and they are parroting even bigger organizations like the WHO. And if you watched what the UN tried to do this last summer, do you know the UN tried to take away the age of consent? That means the UN tried to declare that every child, regardless of their age, is an autonomous being. And that means they have the right to say yes. Yes to every pleasure and every act, and I know you know what I'm talking about, that exists, as long as they say yes. And that is why CERC and CCAN and a multitude of other organizations are leaning heavily on Manitoba education and saying, our research says that this is best. I would like to challenge them with what research has ever done scientific sexualized experimentation on children. It doesn't exist, but their theories say it would be good. So theoretically speaking, your child should be allowed to do whatever, with whomever. This includes adults. I call that pedophilia. And that is illegal in Canada, and for good reason. Our laws in Canada, our criminal code, which dictates our provincial laws, which dictates what our boards of trustees and our libraries and this place behind me, all of them have to fall under those. And they are tasked with ensuring that our children, our most vulnerable, are safe. Period. Full stop. But these outside interest groups have been loud for so long, and we have felt, okay, we're Canadian, we love everyone, everything is good, I love my school, I love my kid's school, and guess what? Sending your kid to school is easy. I homeschooled my kids for 2 years, and I'm a professional teacher. Oh my goodness, that was hard. I would rather teach a group of 45 Rangley grade 7 and 8s than homeschool my kids for a morning. Because guess what? Those ones listen better to me than my own kids do. Okay, so all this to say, they're putting heavy pressure on Manitoba education, and Manitoba education is giving in. Right now you have the right to say no, but once it becomes integrated into every subject, because it is not in Manitoba policy, there's no pocket of protection for you or your child anymore. If this is being taught, and I mean highly sexualized stuff being taught in English language arts, in social studies, and in every other subject from K to 12, from September whatever till the end of the year, there is no escaping it, and there is no opt-out option. the man from the Department of Education, who's renamed himself something like Equity whatever, because equity everything, right? He said there's no opt-out option. He was mortified that he had moms and dads calling him saying, I'm not comfortable with what's being taught in my kids' English class. I want to take them out. He said, you have no right. You have no right to remove them from those classes. And so we have, I'm going to back up a little bit. We have a health curriculum that's very, very what they would call outdated. It was written the year I graduated from university in 2006, so we're talking almost 20 years old. And Manitoba Teachers Society and all of these other organizations are saying, it's so old, you need to update it. You absolutely need to represent and be inclusive and be diverse and be equitable. And all of the other, I'm going to call them red flags, that you're hearing everywhere. We have to be that. And so Manitoba Education is going to change it. And I'm sorry, but your 5 minutes a day, I don't believe can compete with what is going to be forced on our teachers and forced on our principals and introduced into the classrooms. But they haven't actually made a curriculum yet. What they have done though, I want to expose a couple of things that are just basic facts, because I could talk to you probably for hours and hours, but I know it's like lunchtime, right? And everybody wants to go home. So right now you have the right to say no, choose that. Nobody needs to teach your kids about that stuff but you. But you're going to have to make it clear, because there are teachers who are already taking the liberty to do it everywhere. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm going to get to what's happening in Manitoba education right now. So, we think we're kind of safe because we have a conservative government, right? Conservatives probably wouldn't do anything to limit the rights and freedoms of a parent, would they? Well, I'm sorry, but wrong. So, under the banner of equity and diversity and inclusion, our Manitoba education has brought in policies that keep secrets from parents and that are gender affirming. So in 2017, Manitoba education gave teachers and principals the discretionary power to keep these secrets from parents, saying divisional and school personnel are not to disclose students' actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to others, including to parents or to guardians. So if you thought it wasn't happening in Manitoba, it might not be happening in your school, but this is actually the policy. They are not allowed, and it doesn't matter how good your teacher is, they can be fired for telling you, okay? It goes on to say, and to teach educators, that kids under 18 can change their sex designation without parental consent. They don't want you to be a part of that. And then they go on to say, the only requirement, and this is a broad statement, the only requirement is that a child is recognized as a mature minor. Have you guys ever heard that word before? This means that regardless of the child's age, as long as the child is perceived to understand the consequences, quote, the parent's consent is not required, nor can the parent override the child's decision. I am not making up these words. These are in the support documents that have opened the door to everything in your kid's school. So once again, in the name of health and safety, we all love health and safety. Thank you, Nick, for teaching us that words are not what they mean anymore. Honestly, I feel like I've been transported into the dystopian novels that I had to read in high school. What were those novels doing? What did Brave New World tell us? Warning, warning, warning. They were giving us a warning, but nobody's listening anymore. Anyways, so in the name of health and safety, we are seeing that there is no bottom age limit for medical interventions on a child. And we are talking about chemical interventions, and we're talking about surgical interventions. There's no bottom age limit as long as someone says, I think they understand. You are not a part of that equation. And so I'm here, and I want to ask our teachers and our medical clinicians And every single level of Canadian government, because we know Ottawa's listening today, they're very worried about you. Just so you know, you guys are all a massive threat. You weren't a part of the plan. You were supposed to be way too afraid to come. So I want to know, how is it that Manitoba is full steam ahead when it comes to the promotion of the castration of our children and chemical interventions that could be irreversible and cause infinite harm, when we have the United Kingdom and France and Finland and Norway and Australia and Sweden who've all effectively banned any kind of procedures for minors? Science is universal, people. I can look up the journals. They're translated. What are our people missing? Or is it about money? I'm sorry, but it feels like at this point, it always boils down to money. 3 years ago, Finland placed strict limitations on medical interventions for minors. Sweden did the same thing after a 14-year-old girl was found to have osteoporosis and spinal fractures from puberty blockers. The investigation concluded, quote, "The risk of anti-puberty and hormone treatment for those under 18 outweigh the possible benefits." And you know what? The fear-mongering here in Canada is always that if we don't do this, the children will commit suicide. But guess what? There was no wave of suicide in Finland, and there was no wave of mental health catastrophes in Sweden. Every single country who's put a stop to this has said these children need psychotherapy. They need help. But regardless of what other countries are doing at the most basic level, our teachers and Manitoba clinicians know better. They know that children do not have the neurological capacity for making lifelong decisions. And I said I wasn't going to say this, but have you seen the video of the child choosing a cookie over $10,000 cash? You know, I believed a lot of things very strongly when I was 12, and I was raised, I tell people I was raised by wolves, but really I was raised by one wolf. And she taught me to be an incredibly independent thinker and very critical of the world around me. And I rejected that for a long time because I just wanted to be good. But we know as teachers that children cannot make lifelong decisions when their brain's not developed. This is your frontal lobe, and it doesn't finish developing until you're like 25. That's where you make the decisions. When I was an older teenager, I made really poor choices. Not always, like I was generally speaking, a good kid. But I have put myself in very risky positions. And well into my adult life, I had a firm set of beliefs that I thought would never, ever change. But guess what? I've had a massive paradigm shift. And I'm allowed to do that because I have done nothing to my brain or my body to prevent me from carrying on. So I am allowed to change my mind, and I am allowed to do that. But we have kids who are doing things to themselves in the name of health, and there's no going back for them. And it's a travesty. Also, our Manitoba clinicians know that it's impossible to provide informed consent when we don't know the risks. We don't know the psychological risks. We don't know, the long-term. We don't know the long-term physiological risks of doing these things. The science just isn't there because it hasn't been happening for long enough. And our clinicians also know, and this is very unpopular, but if you just leave the kid alone, 4 out of 5 children experiencing gender dysphoria, they will stop. It will desist. And when you have numbers that are that high and success rates that are that high, it is actually unethical to intervene. So even though our own clinics openly admit that they do not know all the harms that might come from using puberty blockers, and I'm not even going to get into the physical stuff, they warn of some of the known risks. These include liver damage, leading to liver disease, blood clots resulting in stroke and heart attack, gallstones, high blood pressure, and non-cancerous tumors leading to loss of vision. Now I want to ask you, because this is a question I'm asking myself, when have schools, when has any book or any teaching or any policy in any school anywhere in Canada in the last 50 years put our children at this level of risk? So we're standing here today asking the Manitoba government and Manitoba Education and Manitoba Health to stand down. Stop funding and creating policies and curriculums that sexualize our children and put them at risk. It is time for a careful reevaluation of what is entering the classroom. And it is time to remind them that parental rights are not up for debate. We only have to look back at the generational trauma endured by Manitoba's Indigenous people to see what happens when government, in the name of education, strip parents of their rights. So just like every cultural revolution of the past, our children are on the front lines. And maybe in the past, people could say that they didn't know, but we cannot. To all levels of government, we stand here today and we say no more. No more sexualization of our children. No medical experimentation. No attempts to remove the parents' authority and protection over their children. No outside special interest groups. And no secrets. Because this is where we draw the line. And frankly, this is the hill I'm willing to die on. Yeah.